where they're coming from, visiting from?
All over the world. I'm from Brazil.
Brazil, cool. Brazil.
Colombia.
Colombia.
Far away in Chicago.
Furthest away so far.
I traveled all year.
Boston. 20-hour flight. What about you?
Sweden.
Sweden.
Chile.
Cool.
Argentina. Further away in Texas.
Texas, all right.
Brazil.
Cool.
From Hong Kong.
Awesome. You wanna? Cool. All right, I actually think you win the award for so far furthest flight for real. Anyone else want to share where they're visiting from?
St. Louis, Missouri.
Missouri, all the way. Yeah. Nice. All right, cool. We have a nice group here, and if you're waiting for a few, and then we're gonna get started. We have a fairly short tour today, so don't worry if anyone's brain is feeling a little exhausted. It's only about an hour, and we'll get to see some cool things, and you guys will get a nice photo op at the dome of MIT, which will be star of the show. I know you've been looking at its mural here. You'll actually get to see it in real life, which will be nice. So once we have everyone, I want to get the thumbs up from them. We'll get. All right, guys, give me 2 seconds and we'll get started and we'll get out of the tight quarters and go somewhere exciting.
Fazendo um videozinho aqui. É uma 360. Vou gravar o tour.
Good.
Depois eu ponho no YouTube.
This is a guy the owner of EPGM. He's creating an MIT like school in São Paulo. It's almost too late to start.
What's the name of the school?
It's like it's almost to start. As I've heard it like
It's not Inspire, no. Inspire is not. This Inspire is already.
Tomorrow.
Because they just have a.
just for technology. MIT like maybe I think it was in Selmo a couple of years ago. Everything.
Contemporary architecture, we'll see at least one example of that. This building, not so much.
Wow. Follow me.
Okay.
Wow.
It looks very so professional.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Camera.
X3, right?
X5.
Ah, it's 5.
Yeah.
Oh,
The last one.
I had X1 and X2. X1 and X3.
Yeah.
I want to buy the new X1. Should share the video of this time.
Yeah. I will put in the YouTube and send the link to the.
Sorry. I was going to start over there, and then Charlie was there, so we are going to tuck ourselves into this little corner. We're going to get out of the Sloan building and see other parts of the campus, but I do think it's a good place to start our tour of the campus of MIT, talking about the background of the building you've been spending most of your weekend, which is of course the Sloan School of Business Management, which is named after this man right here, Alfred P. Sloan, who was part of the MIT class of 1895. Back when he was going to MIT though, it's actually not called MIT, it was called the Boston Institute of Technology, and it would have been located directly across the Charles River in the Back Bay of Boston. 1861, a chemist called William Barton Rogers founds Boston Technical Institute. He had spent a lot of time traveling around Europe, observing all the wonderful polytechnical institutes. And although America had great universities, Harvard's been around for a while at that time, for example, there's no real institute dedicated to studying the sciences and engineering, things like that. So he spends a really long time trying to secure funding for this technical institute, and he's finally going to open the doors, very excited for this, in April of 1861, and then like 2 days later, the American Civil War starts, so it's pretty bad timing. This meant anyone who was old enough to go to university was going to go fight the Civil War for 4 years. So the university didn't really open until 1865, and from 1865 to 1916, it was still in Boston. By the start of the 20th century, though, the population of the university, or student enrollment rather, is growing exponentially. They can't keep up with the tiny campus, and they actually have filled in this section of the Charles River, which you can kind of peek the boats on the Charles behind you there. And so filling in this area, they decided to move the university here, rename it MIT. MIT. Now Sloan will end up becoming quite a wealthy businessman. After graduating MIT, he'd go on to become the CEO of General Motors, accruing a pretty massive fortune, and he decides to give back to his alma mater, MIT, by making a rather generous donation for them to create a business school. And then 1952, the Sloan School for Executive Business Management fully opened its doors, and of course it's grown since then to become a really wonderful part of the university. Actually, at MIT, there's two things people mostly study, which is engineering, and then the second most popular part of the school is actually attending the business school here at Sloan. We'll talk a little bit more about MIT as we go, but there's just like two random details of this building I'd like to point out. It's built in 2011, and actually all the floors you see here are 100% recycled glass. MIT likes a pretty green, self-sustaining university. What I actually think is interesting is you can probably walk past these tiles and not realize that they have fossils in them, and I'm not making that up. They're really old, and actually you can see one right here. You see a little squirrel. It's a little fossil of a shell. So when you're here for the rest of the week, you can kind of play like a little game of I Spy and try to spot all the little fossils in the tiles. But we're going to talk about more serious things happening at MIT's campus in a second. I do want to head down there and talk about the motto of the Sloan School, about how they just won the Nobel Prize in Economics last year. And then we'll pop back here to see more of MIT's campus and get into more exciting things going on up here.
His foundation.
Broken down. Probably will have more value. This is good.
Thank you. Can you be an investor?
The robo? Yeah. The robo.
10 years old? Yeah, I'll put that in recording.
So keeping this tour a little more abridged than normal. It's just for the sake of seeing as much as we can in one go. But you can see the motto for the business school there. To summarize it, essentially they're saying it's not just about teaching people how to be good business people, but how to have like out of the box, really interesting ways to think about business and think about the economy, which they definitely embody here at the Sloan School, because last year they were the recipients of the Nobel Prize in Economics. Now, MIT has 115 Nobel Prizes here at the university that they've won, and they were, of course, two professors here who work at Sloan. This is a really rudimentary explanation of a pretty complicated thesis, obviously. They won a Nobel Prize for it. Essentially, they studied history and politics over the course of 500 years, and they came to this interesting conclusion. Basically, they summarized that countries that ensure a better right to access to things like democracy just have stronger economies over time. It's really interesting. If you want to look it up, it's all on the Sloan's business school website, and it goes more into the details of their work. But we're going to head down this way. We're going to talk about the CIC, which was it's a cool company here, started by a Sloan lecturer, and then we'll wander more down the MIT campus, go inside some buildings, see some labs, talk about science, talk
Chilling talks for 1 hour.
Is this a video?
Yeah. So we put in the YouTube and send
You will send it
the
in the
link
group?
for you.
Awesome.
Yes, for all the group.
Whenever you're tired, you can tell us. I can hold it too for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Mike, are you an investor normally or not?
I do. Yeah.
You like it?
Yeah.
Americans like
Spark, we both
engaging.
Sorry.
You guys normally know about the market, what is happening. And I see that in your country, people really follow
a little bit of a hazy, strange, cloudy day. And it has little to do with clouds, where you're getting all the haze from the Canadian wildfires up north. So the sun's just blocked out.
He's taking a full brief.
That concrete building over there, that's the architecture, is actually the business school's library. If anyone was curious. I do think there are much nicer libraries on campus. We're also building and construction. Constructing. Here in Central Square.
You understood?
Alright guys, we're gonna head towards this way. Please follow me. It's a nice place to stop for our next. but I do just think that it is fairly funny that that is the tallest building, especially if you're coming from other major cities in the world. Cambridge doesn't really have lots of buildings, so we had a little further across that for our next stop. By the way, if anyone was wondering about this haunted fountain, well, the center of the universe, and it is actually the artist of it is a man who is a lecturer at MIT and a Harvard Medical School. He's a biology professor by trade. He's quite an eccentric guy. If you Google him, he has like long white hair, a beard, he wears like neon sweatshirts. He's quite a character, and he makes art.
Monday when I get back. All of us sitting around looking for places we're standing around. Gather in front. We're going to focus on this building, so I think it's just a better view from over there. So once we get out of this stop, we get into more of like what's currently happening at MIT. We move a little away from the history, but I do think the MIT Welcome Center's history is quite interesting. It's not always the Welcome Center. It's actually the last remnant of what was called the MIT Rad Lab, MIT Innovations Laboratory, that actually would have been a massive research complex that would have gone all the way down Main Street here, and it was actually the largest active research lab during the Second World War. I've just never heard of it before. It's really overshadowed by two other famous ones. Of course, you have Los Alamos in New Mexico, the development of the atomic bomb, and you have Bletchley Park. If you're into computer science, you might have heard of them in London. They cracked the Nazi Enigma code. Here at the Rad Lab, they're working on radar technology, and radar tech is pretty rudimentary in the 1940s, using these big metal satellite discs that emanated, gave off this kind of electromagnetic wave called a microwave. I'd heard of that before. I'm thinking about the microwave oven, of course. And these microwaves can like roughly detect an image and bounce it back to the radar. And this is going to be used for the Allied war effort in really important ways. For example, now you can actively track if an enemy rocket is coming towards your city, and you can use what is now called the anti-aircraft radar gun, invented here at the Rad Lab, that can track the missile and shoot it out of the sky before it has a chance to land. We now are using radar in plane navigations for really the first time. We have Allied planes using radar to navigate bombing campaigns, but of course, the later transfers the fact that all of you were safely able to land here at Boston Logan Airport because of radar tech that's developed here at the Rad Lab. You also have, of course, ships throughout the Pacific and Atlantic with the threat of enemy torpedoes coming towards them, but now you can use radar to track those submarines and those torpedoes and avoid any kind of combat. So a lot of important research was happening here, and there were 4,000 researchers working on the Rad Labs at the Rad Lab. But they were so notable that in 1942, a good 1,000 physicists were recruited from the Rad Lab to go work on the Manhattan Project. So they kind of got stolen away. By 1945, the funding for this research that had been given to them by the government had dried up. The war was over, and so there wasn't much to do. So they closed down the lab, ripped down most of the buildings, redistribute many of these scientists. But one man who had worked on navigational radar tech here, called Professor Draper, would later start his own lab that's down the street from us called Draper Laboratory, still active. And he actually would be later responsible for the moon landing by creating the navigational computer that got the Apollo 11 to the surface of the moon. Now, a guy working here also invents the microwave oven. If you're wondering if there was any connection, there really was. This sounds fake, but if you go inside, they have a whole plaque about it. So you can read about it if you felt like it. Then he has a chocolate bar in his pocket one day when he's doing research and it melted, and he realized that microwaves could maybe be harnessed to heat up food one day, and he goes on to, after the war, invent the microwave oven. So kind of random how innovation can work. But we're going to actually cut through one of the buildings over here to go talk about my favorite research lab at MIT, the Lab of Biomimetics. So the MIT lab. I do want to point this out though very quickly to you guys before we go on. I felt it would be worth it to show you the campus map of MIT, because MIT is quite large. We're actually really only scratching the surface today. This is you guys down here essentially, and this is all we're really seeing today. This is this tiny section. You can see how much more of the campus is still left to explore if you feel like doing that on your own. For reference, again, this is where you guys are, and this is where we're going to end. So there's still a whole chunk of MIT to explore if you feel like it, but we're going to head this way. Signatures kind of hanging from the buildings here. I think you see it a little better once the trees come. They are actually produced by AI, invented by MIT. What they did is quite interesting. They took the signature of everyone who works in this area on research projects or in the buildings, and they compiled it into one signature of all thousands of employees in Kendall Square. So that's actually what's on the bottom of the building there, in case anyone was curious. But we're going to cut through the police building here. Talk about the media lab.
We're going to the media lab? Yeah. We were like there.
And how you connected the whole thing to the balance sheet, the case study with that private equity that buys fixes and sells. That was really good. Oh, there you go.
Innovation, yeah. Beyond the box.
Outside the box, thank you.
Around the box.
Around the box, yeah.
Innovation award.
I remember we are in the 20s.
I was gonna say you can always scan if you get locked in any of the buildings. We're gonna head out of here just making sure no one got left behind, sorry, but I do love the fun little details when you come through MIT buildings, the vending machines of technological equipment that you might need. It is something I think is a really fun thing that shows that you're at a technical university. Also, we're not going to explore because we're going to get lost. I've only been down there a few times. You go down those steps, they're the tunnels of MIT. Most of the MIT buildings are actually connected by tunnels, and there's stuff that happens down there. If you feel like exploring, there's a tunnel map. That is a thing to do on another day, not my choice. We only have an hour. It takes us an hour to get lost out there. And we can see the buildings when we need to from here. So we're gonna pause here, and then hopefully our next few stops are actually go inside since it's cold out.
but I want to make sure everyone comes this direction. So there's two buildings here. One's a little bit older. The white tiled building is actually the List Visual Arts Center of MIT, which is a free contemporary art museum if you're curious. It's also designed by world-renowned architect I.M. Pei. Pei, of course, designed the glass pyramids over the Louvre, if you're familiar with those, but he also attended architecture school here at MIT. He designed this building and the tall building behind the green building as well, but the building we want to talk about is a more modern attachment off to the right there, and that is the MIT Media Lab. Now, a lot of research happens there. One particular lab I find most interesting at MIT is the lab of Professor Hugh Hare, who works in a field of science kind of complicated. It's called biomimetics. Essentially, it's just robotics that mimic something in real life. A really good example of this is if you've heard of Boston Dynamics before and seen those robots. Boston Dynamics, by the way, was started by MIT alum. The MIT Stata School. We're going to pass with the cheetah that they initially invent there. But Hugh Hare has a fascinating backstory. He has always been an avid outdoorsman. He loves to hike and mountain climb, rock climb, and when he was 17, he ends up hiking to the peak of something called Mount Washington, the state of New Hampshire, just north of us. Mount Washington's not a terribly tall mountain, but it actually has some of the worst weather anywhere in the entire globe at its peak, and he's rock climbing, and a blizzard comes rolling in. It was not forecasted. He did not expect to be caught in a storm, and this blizzard causes horrible conditions, including negative 40-degree wind chills. Now, I have learned from giving this tour that negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit is also negative 40 degrees Celsius, if that helps anyone. It is incredibly cold, and he is stuck without shelter for 3 days. Now, by the time he was rescued, he had suffered really catastrophic frostbite, so he ends up having to get both of his legs amputated from the knee down, and he's only 17, so this is a massive, life-altering event at quite a young age. But what Hugh Hare has gone on to do is fascinating, because his lab mostly researches robotic prosthetic limbs. So Hugh Hare, having suffered becoming a double amputee at a young age, realized that prosthetic technology had basically not developed at all with any of the advancements in modern technology, and he decided that when he eventually comes to do his fellowship here at MIT, he has a degree in robotic engineering, that he was going to revolutionize prosthetic technology, and that's what he does at the Media Lab here. They make robotic prosthetics. They claim to be literally creating cyborgs, fusing robotics with the human body. So you have to Google these, because only my descriptions can only do it so much justice. To see them visually is quite impactful. But for example, if I had from here down amputated, the lab could create a perfect anatomical robotic arm for me. What makes these remarkable is not just their range of motion, because they have all these tiny little joint movements we take for granted. They actually use your brain to move them around, just like my brain has told my fingers to wiggle. So basically, they attach these little electromagnetic rings to the rest of your muscle tissue that's left on your amputated limb, and then it uses the electrical signals from your brain to go through the muscles into your robotic arm and move it around. So these are revolutionary. I mean, they give patients the most incredible range of motion. Again, things we take for granted, tying your shoes, gripping water bottles, these patients can now do. But also, Hugh Hare did invent new kinds of prosthetic limbs so he can rock climb, and he still does all the time. So Google him. He is fascinating. You should watch his TED Talk. He's one of my favorite scientists because he also makes prosthetics for patients here, donated prosthetics after the Boston Marathon bombing. So he's a really fascinating character here at the campus. But we're going to head down this direction.
Yeah.
You mentioned that was the toilet building. But that's the technically that.
And I wonder, but I think about this actually all the time, because that's still the college. And it has the MIT Neurological Lab on top, so like, are they not talking about high school? Lab on top? Alright, friends, we're going to walk to get to the next stop.
Labs. It's very interesting.
hour. So normally we actually go into the Broad, but I do just want to mention it. However, if you're really into this kind of science, the Broad Discovery Center is open 7 days a week, and it's normally open until 7 o'clock. So you can check it out. The Broad is part of MIT. It's also somewhat not part of MIT. It's kind of this interesting lab where it's a collaboration between itself, MIT, Harvard, and also a lot of the hospitals in this area. The Broad is founded in 2004 by a man called Eric Lander, who had worked at the MIT Whitehead Institute next door. He had actually been there when the Whitehead Institute of MIT had been working on the Human Genome Project. The Broad Institute mostly focuses on genetic studies as well, and they try to uncover the mystery of things like why do some people develop certain kinds of cancer and heart diseases, psychiatric illnesses that are also genetic, including really, really rare genetically inherited illnesses as well. And they try to uncover what the genetic reasoning for these is, and then if there's a way to treat them through gene therapy, including something called CRISPR technology, which CRISPR is fairly complicated, but essentially it's like a molecular pair of scissors. It can read your genetic code, detect, for example, if you carry the gene for something called sickle cell anemia, and another device, or excuse me, it would act like scissors, literally cutting out that unhealthy gene, and another device acts like a little pasting machine, and it pastes the healthy version of the gene instead. Now, the reason I specifically use sickle cell anemia as an example is that gene therapy with CRISPR is actively being used at Boston Medical Center for sickle cell patients, and it's curing them of this genetically inherited disease. And the whole goal behind the Broad is to, quote, cure 45,000 genetically inherited illnesses. Now, they have a $750 million endowment for research there. 200 or so million of that comes from the federal government. Some of it is private donors as well. And it's a really interesting part of MIT, but we're also going to go into another really cool research lab here, which is the Koch Institute of Integrative Cancer Research. If you want to follow me inside, so we can actually go inside the building.
That's another one.
Thank you for doing this paper.
Big old group, so we have more space down here if anyone needs it. I'm mostly stopping because I want to specifically refer to this image really quickly. So we're here at the Koch Center for Integrative Cancer Research, and I'll tell you more about them in a sec. But this image here, I point out because we don't have time to visit, but a little further down is the MIT McGovern Institute for Brain Research at MIT, and they specialize obviously in studying the brain. They develop new kinds of CAT scans and MRIs and ways to image and map the brain like this. And then they also are part of something called the Bacauer Institute for Learning and Memory, which works on the Brain Health Initiative, studying the brain from infants to the elderly to study how our brain ages over time, and the hopes of figuring out things like Alzheimer's and dementia. And they used AI to actually track the adrenal gland paths in your brain. So that's what all these little white squiggles are. Mostly we're here to talk about the Koch Center, which you noted they kind of have these really interesting images in their lobby for art. The Koch Center for Integrative Cancer Research at MIT was founded back in 2011, and if you've heard the name Koch before, it is the Koch brothers you might be thinking of, the businessmen. David and Michael Koch both went to MIT in the 1960s. 2008, David Koch's diagnosed with cancer, and he's thinking again, it's the 21st century, how come cancer treatments haven't really developed that well? And so
he gave $100 million for the creation of this lab. And what makes this place quite special is not just because of course, the brilliant minds of MIT, but its location. And that is because it's by some of the best hospitals in the world to treat cancer. For example, Mass General is down the street. We have some of the best oncologists and surgeons in the world. You also have the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute here, which actually, they have something called the Bridge Project with the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and this Bridge Project essentially is a way for them to connect researchers, secure funding. They work on a lot of research here. Two things I want to mention for time's sake. One involves something called a biopolymer, which is kind of complicated science. So essentially, they can make a mold of an organ. For example, if you're getting cancer treatment, you get liver cancer, you have to get half your liver removed, there's a potential in the future for someone to create a model of your liver and coat that with your own stem cells so that in a lab they can artificially grow you a new organ. So that's one of the things they work on researching here. And they also work on something called immunotherapy research. You might be familiar with immunotherapy, you might have heard of it before. It's a relatively new kind of cancer treatment that is showing remarkable promise. So when you get sick, your body's immune system, acts like your white blood cells act like a little army. It sends in your white blood cells to attack, your bacterial infection, your viral infection. But what immunotherapy does is it causes an immune response in your body to send in those white blood cells and attack your tumors, literally kill off those cancer cells. And I actually once gave this tour to an oncologist at Mass General. She said 8 years ago, 50% of her skin cancer patients, melanoma patients, were terminal, but through the use of immunotherapy, that had gone down to 8% of her patients. And I have a personal experience with how all this works. I had a cousin 5 years ago who was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. By the time his cancer was caught, he had tumors in his brain and his liver. It's a very advanced stage of cancer, but he went to Mass General. They offered him chemotherapy, they offered him surgery and immunotherapy, and he's actually in full remission from his cancer right now. And his doctors really largely credit immunotherapy. What's extra special about immunotherapy is it works against the most serious kinds of cancer, lung cancer and glioblastoma, which is brain cancer. So it's this real important breakthrough in cancer treatment that they specialize in working on here. And there's a lot that happens at the Koch Center, but we have to see more of the campus. So we're gonna head out this way. I'm gonna point out another image at the end here. It looks like a pretty swirl of beautiful colors. Kind of interesting to look at. This is actually really periodontal disease, which is the disease that causes your teeth to rot out of your face. So typically it doesn't look that nice in real life. That's why it says periodontal disease. It never looks so good.
It's a beautiful disease.
We're going to head out this way to the data center.
That thing looks good.
I'm going to briefly mention two things before we go into this data center. We're going to go inside and look at something fun in a second. But unfortunately, I have to talk to you about one thing that's quite serious before we go inside and see the fun thing. Over here we have a memorial in front of this data center. For that man there, you can see his picture. His name was Officer Sean Collier. MIT has their own campus police department, and in April of 2013, tragically, of course, we had the Boston Marathon bombings, and the men responsible went on the run, and poor Sean Collier, a 27-year-old campus police officer, was sitting in his cruiser here doing his job, when unfortunately the Tsarnaev brothers came across him. There was a struggle between the two, and Sean Collier would lose his life, becoming one of the victims of the Boston Marathon bombing. So MIT really devastated by his loss because Sean Collier was actually really close to many of the students here. He was an integral part of campus. They would build him, nice loud concrete truck for you guys. They built him this memorial in his honor. It's actually designed by the head of the MIT Architecture Department. So in case you're curious what it is, I want to move this just a little further down this way to point out one other thing before we go into this data center. You just don't get a good view from our perspective. And the entrance is over here, so it all works. Go into the MIT data center right there in a second. But if you come here, I want to point out more of the campus continues down this way. You might see that glass paneled building there. That is the Schwarzman's Computing Center at MIT. It is the most expensive addition to the campus. It's the newest addition as well. It did cost $350 million, so it is quite hefty cost there. If anyone was curious, by the way, MIT has a $26 billion endowment, and they use, by the way, 1% of that endowment for campus art, which is interesting. They use part of that endowment also to pay for the tuition for students who come from lower incomes, so they use it for a lot of great things. Now, that building there is dedicated mostly to studying artificial intelligence. Now, we're going to see the CCL program when we go inside, which is computer science and AI, which still is based from this data center. And of course, you might be familiar with the fact that AI has become a booming new part of the tech industry, and it's an ever-growing field. And so they work on all kinds of AI research there, from studying its risks to its benefits, potential needs for regulation and everything in between. This is a pretty interesting part of the campus. I also don't know how well you can see behind. There's a smoke tower with a little bit of steam getting let off. That is the MIT cogeneration plant, which does power a good portion of MIT's campus. It's also home to the MIT Nuclear Engineering Laboratory, because part of the way it uses cogeneration, different kinds of power, is that it does partially use nuclear power to operate the power plant, and behind it there is a tank of nuclear wastewater. So don't worry while you're studying at the Sloan School, I'm sure. It won't melt down. It's actually one of the oldest nuclear power plants in America. So,
Okay. Oh yeah. I'm concerned.
The data center here is quite an unusual shaped building at MIT. You might have noticed some of the architecture. We'll talk a little bit more about it. It was designed by architect Frank Nancy and today's donor, a guy called William H. Gates. Literally never heard him get called that. It's Bill Gates. What does it sound nice? It's funny, I'm sorry. His name is written as Bill Gates.
Comes in and then becomes a lot of it. I saw that when I think the movies came on HBO.
There's two things I was going to quickly point out to you while we're over here. So wait for everyone. Shuffle in. Make some space. In case anyone wants to know what either of these things are, these are called Collier's cranes, which is another memorial for Sean Collier. It's the main reason I brought them up, because these are really eye-catching for people when we enter. Also, that mirror is by Anish Kapoor, the pretty famous contemporary artist. This data center here is also a campus center for students. There are about 4,500 undergraduate students at MIT and about 20,000 students overall if you include the graduate programs. But I'm sure I'll something on the corner here. All gathered. Start to see what's happening. Thank you. It's a better view if you stand over here. What is this is a good question. So this here is a little bit of fun, interactive computer tech for you guys. I use tall groups. You have to be really willing to make a complete fool of yourself by flailing around just like a crazy person, because it better interacts. It uses heat sensors, so it's literally sensing your body heat, and then there's about a few different settings, and the more you interact, the more it moves around. So in case anyone wants to play around with that for a second, it is, I think, kind of interesting. We've talked about more serious science at MIT. It's fun to see the more fun science. So I have a very fun story to tell you. When you're done playing around, if anyone's not interested in playing around, we're going to do over here. Take your time, interact with that.
How was today?
Oh, hanging in there. Final push.
Yeah. Today the dance, I mean, I didn't feel like it was like this way.
Oh yeah. Indeed, sure.
Probably wondering what this is all about. I will explain that to you guys in a second, because there's a reason there's a cop car. Say if you know the story, you will know why. Because otherwise, it's kind of random for many others. All right, guys. So we are going to see the dome of MIT, and in about 15-20 minutes when we get there, it's going to be where we're going to end. And I want you to imagine this car here when you see the building sitting on the very, very tippy top of the MIT dome. Because MIT MIT is quite notable for, just being incredible scientists, a lot of serious students. They have like a 6% acceptance rate. They do have a good sense of humor here, and every senior class carries out an MIT hack, which is a prank. It's a practical joke that students play on the university. When we're exiting out that way, you can see the list of rules for the hacks of MIT, because they do have a set guideline. And in 1994, the most famous hack of all time was carried out. This MIT campus police officer car was stolen from the school by students and put on the very top of the MIT dome.
What?
Yes, what indeed? Because people woke up, started going to class, and were like, how'd someone get a car up there? Because that really does defy the laws of physics. How are you going to do that? So they couldn't figure out how to get it down, and eventually they had to tell the students, like, if you're responsible, you're not going to get in trouble. You just really need to tell us how you got it up there. So we had to figure out how to get it down. And the students, they're clever. They're MIT students. So when they'd stolen the car, they had removed basically all of the heavy interiors, cars, seats, the engine, all of that jazz. And they basically just made it into the shell of a car, and then they had cut it into several pieces. You can kind of see where it has been separated. And then they made a little pulley system. Some guy got onto the roof, they made this pulley system with ropes, and they literally just pulled it up to the roof, reassembled it, put the tires up to make it look like the full car. So it was a pretty hilarious practical joke. Clearly the university's not mad. It's been 31 years, and it's still just on display for students to come and see. As we exit this way though, check out the rules for the hacks, and you can actually see a picture of this car on top of the dome. Also, when we go out this way, you'll see a random statue of a cow, and that was actually from a famous restaurant called Hilltop Steakhouse, which students also stole and put on top of the dome, and it drove up restaurant sales, which is kind of funny as well. But we're gonna head this way. One little last thing, you turn around, you see the classroom of MIT is a beaver. That's the school's mascot. The reason it's a beaver is it's a famous school for engineering. 52% of students are engineering students. And of course the engineers of the natural world are the beavers.
The mascot. What the heck is it?
Just as we're passing, in case anyone was curious, you can see the cop car on the dome, and then the hacking ethics. So all the rules for hacks. Do not steal anything. I think they broke the rules and they stole it.
Oh, that's the hydrant that he was talking about, right?
Another famous hack was by the way, their rival is not Harvard. Their rival is Caltech. Harvard's rival is Yale. And they have football games every year. I'll tell you the rest of this out here. This way. I'll tell you the rest of that story in 5 seconds before everyone else is out. Corner here. Shortcut in to get to the dome. You'll see how magical way. Is anyone staying at the Marriott? You don't have a far commute back, or no one's staying at the Marriott over here?
Maybe some people.
Some people. I was gonna say that's nice for you. You don't have a long commute. All right. What I was gonna say is another hack is that during the Harvard-Yale football game, MIT students, right before the teams were about to play, inflated a massive football on the field that said MIT, and then they exploded it, and glitter and confetti went all over the field right before Harvard and Yale played. So the played a hack on both of them. I did want to point out the building quickly before we go to our last section of the tour. It's quite unusual architecture. It is by this notable contemporary architect, Frank Gehry. If you Google Frank Gehry, all of his buildings are kind of surreal in their designs. And this is his own artistic vision, by the way. He said he wanted to create a building that looked like a gathering of drunk robots. So it's up to you whether you can see the visual interpretation there. It is the robotics research lab at MIT as well, so that's why. MIT did sue Frank Gehry over this building, and they won out of court in a settlement because there's a lot of sharp angles here to look cool. You can imagine why it's not great in a cold climate like New England when sheets of ice build up on top of the building over the winter, and then the first day where it's a little bit freezing, it warms up the metal, and then those sheets of ice were jetting off the building and actually injured people on the other side. So they sued Frank Gehry, they won, they did repairs, and now they're doing even more. But we're gonna make a little shortcut. We're gonna go into the side door of the infinite corridor of MIT, which I'll explain, and that'll lead us out to the dome where we're gonna end, and we're gonna take pictures and all this stuff. You guys will follow me this way. Another hack, by the way, was played from this building in front of us, the MIT Green Building, also designed by IMK. The stuff at the top is the MIT Meteorological Lab, but it's also nicknamed the Tetris Building because students played a live action game of Tetris from the building by rigging the windows with remote control LED lights, and that was the hack for that year. We're gonna head down this way. Right next to the tree is where the MIT Rain Collection Center is. Basically, underneath there's these big drums for collecting rainwater, which they then use for a variety of purposes throughout the campus. The second half of the group once we get inside this hallway. You'll see why. We're making our way to where we're going to end. There's not a lot of stories left. We're going to have to kind of walk through the hallway in a second. There's something behind me I want to point out. So we're entering into what's called the infinite corridor of MIT. It's all going to lead us out to the dome. The infinite corridor is kind of shaped like a U, like this, and basically the idea is you can get on one side of the campus out to the other through this building. It is a literally long hallway. It's almost 900 feet long, and it's where many of the undergraduate courses are at MIT. Now behind me, all the way in the back, off to the left side, it's been called the Wright Brothers Wind Tunnel. MIT is the first university in the world to have an aeronautics lab, meaning they're the first university in the world to study airplanes. This was opened in 1911. By the way, it's only 8 years after the first ever flight. So MIT was already realizing planes were going to be the wave of the future. Eventually in the 50s, that joins, it fuses with the aerospace department at MIT, which is also down here. What's cool about the Wright Brothers Wind Tunnel is that it's literally a wind tunnel. It has this big fan, shoots 600-mile-per-hour winds at anything you put in front of it. So test, for example, if Boeing's developing a new plane, they can take a wing here, test aerodynamics. Cars come here to test aerodynamics out. So it's a cool part of the campus. We're gonna head to the left. We're gonna pass a yellow brick wall that is the MIT Banana Lab, which is a real thing. It is literally a building, part of the building here where some rich person left an infinite supply of bananas for MIT students. So it literally smells like bananas sometimes. I know that sounds silly, but on the other side of the wall, there's some pictures of when they're building the dome, where they're building the aeronautics lab, in case anyone's curious. We're gonna kind of wander this way through the building to our last stop before the dome, and then we're gonna head that way. You guys can read. You can also see you to another lecture hall.
Bueno,
the wind tunnel is back there. You can see the early aeronautics lab here if anyone is curious. This is also really fun, by the way, because as we pass, you can hold up and it tells you which one of the trash is to put in. Two departments here, there's a bunch of different departments, but we're going to pass the materials engineering department and the mathematics department, but robotics is here, nanobot technology is research on this floor as well. One of you guys can follow me down the hall. They wanted us to time all of you ending at the exact same spot for a group picture, which is now good to see that their group is only directly, so it's going to work out fine. You can see more of the hallway down that way. You can see what I mean, that it's literally one long hallway. It's easy to get lost if you're not familiar, because all the halls look exactly the same. Another bit of cool art, if you guys keep it that way. Really quickly, just so we don't all get caught up here, George Eastman was the CEO of Kodak Camera, and it's good luck for students to rub his nose on his statue before finals to get hopefully passing grades. So there's a lot of serious scientists, and of course they have some superstitions, and that is why his nose is rubbed down. We're going to have a look through this way though. One little last thing to talk about before we do that, and then you guys are free. You get to go rest your brains for the rest of the day. Prepare for the rest of your long week of listening to people talk to you. It does look like DNA, right? It is. I scanned this before to read more about it a while ago, and it still doesn't exactly make sense to me what it is. It has to do with math. It's not fun.
Or it could be inorganic chemistry.
It's something. If you scan the QR code here, it explains what it is. I just was pausing this here so we don't lose anyone, but there's a really cool piece of art here that I want to have you peek at. There's a not great piece of art over there that makes me laugh. It's the Garden of Eden. I do not know the context of why it's over there, but it's like this funny little mural next to this great sculpture. Whenever anyone
Suddenly, I'm feeling comfortable.
All right, guys, this is our last stop, or second to last stop. We're gonna wait for everyone to get a little closer and come table this way. It's quite boring. Unfortunately. All right, so a really wonderful part of MIT that I'd like to end the tour to is past her. She has a little memorial over there, but then there's an infographic about her here. And Ellen Swallow Richards was actually the first woman to ever attend MIT, and she revolutionized the university. So MIT was all male at one point until 1873. Now, Ellen Swallow Richards had actually studied chemistry at Vassar's Women's College, and MIT wasn't fully admitting female students, but they allowed her to audit courses, and the professors were, needless to say, blown away at how intelligent she was, and it actually makes MIT officials realize that they should start admitting female students to the university, so they do, and they also would change their PhD policy because of her, because she would also become the first woman to receive a PhD from the university, and become the first female professor. She was a professor here all the way until her death in 1911. You can see her with the staff of the chemistry department here. She also would be the woman who starts the first ever all-female research laboratory in the United States. You can see them here. Ellen, she didn't just study chemistry, she also revolutionized home economics. When we think about home ec, it's like how to cook and clean, but it was a lot more complicated than that. What she's actually arguing for, she's one of the first scientists to argue for this, is that water systems should be clean. That unclean water leads to outbreaks of diseases, and that's why places like Boston, New York often have outbreaks of disease. The Charles River was incredibly polluted, so she starts to actually advocate for cleaning up of waterways and for doing basic things like washing your hands before you cooked food. So she revolutionized not just chemistry, but our idea of not spreading disease, and did a lot for the university. For some context, I've read Harvard a few times. I know that sounds fake, but Harvard doesn't become fully co-ed till 1979, so 100 years after MIT, for context. So that's why I like to emphasize her as well, because she is just a really remarkable woman. We're gonna head out this way to the dome. I have one fact about the dome, and then most of you are just here to take pictures, I promise. You're not gonna listen for much longer. Ellen Swallow. As we're walking out as well, if you look at the entranceway for a few of the entrances here, they have scientists' name, and they're all categorized by different kinds of science.
This is a famous place.
Is this open to public? Yeah? Yeah.
You guys can gather here. I'm going to take pictures, group shots, whatever anyone wants. If you come over here, I'm just going to tell you literally two things, kind of just pointing in both directions. Hopefully the other group will be out here. They want you guys to take a group picture. So, while we are here, before you guys are able to go take all your nice selfies, the MIT Dome behind me is obviously the central heart of the campus, most notable portion of MIT. Now imagine that cop car here, by the way, that is of course where they put it. This building is modeled after the Roman Pantheon. The Pantheon's 2,000 years old. The Romans loved mathematics, and you could fit a perfect mathematical sphere in that building. And so, of course, as a bunch of engineering and math nerds, they wanted to copy that building, and that's why it looks like that one. There's a library up there. If anyone wants to go to the fancy library, it's up on the 5th floor. You can take the elevator there. Also, if you look behind you, do you see a really nice view of the Boston skyline? It is in that section of Boston, the Back Bay, where MIT's campus originally was actually located. And you can see the Charles River there. MIT has a sail club. They have boats coming up and down, and you can actually get an MIT piracy certificate. That is actually real. The university will give you one of those if you take sailing, archery, and fencing. So that's basically it. I don't want to keep you guys with my facts all day, but they did want you guys to take a group shot. So I think Charlie's group will be out in a second. If anyone wants to take pictures here, take them. I will take pictures of you too if you want. I'm good at taking pictures. I do it all the time.
Picture?
Of course.
We go all together to have a picture.
Yes.
If we record the group, right?
All of you.
First line should go second line.
With some people join the end there. It'll be a little more balanced. We'll have a better shot.
I can.
You guys are good at organizing yourselves.
Where's the goalie?
Alright, I'll do a countdown, don't worry. Alright, ready guys? 1, 2, 3. Cheese.
MIT.
Alright, I'm gonna take one more. Stay with me for a second. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Ready guys? 1, 2, 3. Cheese. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Someone. Paolo, can you take a picture? Team for future.
Which team are?
Oh, it's the three of us. It's the future.
It looks big. Yeah.
Anyone want me to take a picture? I will. I'll volunteer. You're like, I'm not. Yeah, some people don't like pictures, but some people really like them here. So.
Quick question. Yeah. I saw pictures of this being. Oh yeah, that's gonna be next week's post.